And we're back. This is A Middle Perch, live on the internet. I'm your host, MTK, on the MIC. And we're going to get into some details about Hong Kong today, because this week we've been talking about the NBA versus China conversation, or China versus the NBA, depending on how you want to look at that. If you don't know, Daryl Morey, the GM of the Houston Rockets, sent out a tweet that was in support of the protesters in Hong Kong, and then quickly deleted it, and China reacted angrily and loudly, and the NBA's commissioner, Adam Silver, tried a quick apology, and China found that even more offensive, and then now the NBA has put out a second apology, and China has begun censoring NBA content in the way that China does. And in the previous couple of videos, I just reacted off the cuff and wanted today to give some details. So what we're going to do is we're going to read a piece by Evan Osnos called Hong Kong on the March. This is from September 2nd, last month, about 6 weeks ago, shall we say, 5 weeks ago. And this piece has some of the details that we have discussed casually, but I wanted to lay it out there for you as a means of thinking about what's going on in Hong Kong before you come to conclusions about how to think about what's going on between China and the NBA. Hong Kong on the March. Just before Hong Kong returned to Chinese control in 1997, a team of behavioral scientists conducted a fascinating experiment. Ying Yi Hong and some colleagues recruited local college students and showed them a set of iconic images, either from America, Mickey Mouse, a cowboy, or from China, the Monkey King, a dragon. Then they posed questions intended to elicit their values and beliefs. The results revealed that depending on which images were presented, the students readily switched between Chinese and Western worldviews. 22 years later, young people in Hong Kong describe themselves overwhelmingly as Hong Kongers rather than Chinese. Their resentment of the Communist Party's growing involvement in their politics and culture has fueled the crisis that has consumed the territory this summer. Protests that began in June in response to a proposed extradition law have expanded into a broad-based movement with the slogan, "Retake Hong Kong, Revolution of Our Times." An extradition law. So if you think about that, that means the ability of China to take certain people from Hong Kong, whether Hong Kong wants that to happen or not. A city that prides itself on high-toned rule of law has become the backdrop for a grinding standoff between police in riot gear and young men and women in gas masks, goggles, and yellow helmets, testing the resolve of one of the world's economic centers and the dexterity of China's president, Xi Jinping. A popular protest motto on banners and city walls evokes the stakes, quote, "If we burn, you burn with us," close quote. In Beijing, the Communist Party was at first largely silent about the unrest, but after protesters defaced the national insignia of China's liaison office on July 21st, Chinese media called them separatists, and the movement a color revolution, poisonous terms in Chinese politics. Though Facebook and Twitter are banned on the mainland, the party launched a global social media campaign. In a tweet, China Central Television, that's CCT you hear about so much, adapted Martin Niemöller's language to liken the protesters to Nazis. Quote, "First they hurled bricks," and so on. Close quote. Other posts circulated conspiracy theories. A man in a photograph taken at a protest was labeled a CIA commander when, in fact, he worked for the New York Times. Last Monday, Twitter accused China of a, quote, "coordinated, state-backed," close quote, operation, quote, "specifically attempting to sow political discord in Hong Kong," close quote. That's what Twitter accused China of. The site barred advertising by China's state media and dropped nearly 1,000 accounts, some of which operated under the kind of fake folksy personae used by Russian agents in the U.S. election in 2016. One Chinese account described its owner as a, quote, coupon clipping, money saving, low key hustling supermom, close quote, in Columbus, Ohio, who lives, quote, in the suburbs, quote, but is from, quote, from the hood. Fake accounts. Facebook and YouTube undertook a similar cull. By late August, the protests had evolved into the most sustained challenge to the Chinese Communist Party since the uprising in Tiananmen Square 30 years ago. An ominous distinction. In 1989, the party blamed the tumult on a cabal of foreign black hands before unleashing troops who killed hundreds, perhaps thousands, in and around the square. This summer, party officials once again blamed the unrest on black hands and warned Hong Kong's protesters not to, quote, play with fire or, quote, mistake restraint for weakness, close quote. To drive home the point, the People's Liberation Army garrison in Hong Kong, which rarely draws attention to itself, released a video in which troops performed riot control exercises. Just across a bridge on the mainland, the Shenzhen Bay Sports Center became the site of an encampment for military vehicles for the People's Armed Police, a paramilitary force. In a video posted by the People's Daily, an officer with a megaphone shouted in Cantonese, which is spoken in Hong Kong, "Stop the violence, repent and be saved." Yeah, so Cantonese is a separate language from the Mandarin that's spoken in China, and the vast majority of China, we should say, and is, of course, the national language. And so that issue from 97 to now has been a thing that China has stayed somewhat out of, we could say. The turmoil on China's cosmopolitan coast is anathema to the instincts of China's 66-year-old president, both personally and politically. Interesting. So this turmoil is anathema to Xi Jinping. The son of a high-level revolutionary, Xi grew up near the party headquarters in Beijing. As a teenager, he lived through the chaos of the Cultural Revolution, when young Red Guards forced him to wear a metal dunce cap and imprisoned his father. In the 90s, many of Xi's peers decamped to Hong Kong and elsewhere to make their fortunes, but Xi didn't join them. He never studied abroad or learned a foreign language. Instead, he made his way to the apex of a Leninist state. Since taking power in 2012, he has set about extinguishing all challenges to his authority. He has abolished term limits on his presidency, detained hundreds of activists and human rights lawyers, and overseen an anti-corruption purge that has punished 1.5 million members of the party. In Hong Kong, that rigidity has taken a toll. In the run-up to the crisis, Xi's proxies rejected even minimal demands, betting wrongly that the protesters would just relent. Compromising now, the theory of hardline politics goes, would encourage further defiance. So the risk of a crackdown or a sudden wave of mass arrests is real. And yet for Xi and his country, a massacre reminiscent of Tiananmen would be almost incalculably costly. He faces a wobbly economy at home, and Hong Kong is a mammoth financial hub, a currency exchange and a source of foreign capital, with a stock market larger than London's. A crackdown would also undermine Xi's larger mission, to convince the world that China is a credible contender for global leadership in the age of Trump. On Xi's political calendar, he has upcoming reasons for avoiding a calamity, including a triumphant celebration set for October 1st to mark the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic, and in January, elections in Taiwan, another territory that China would like to see reunified. Bloodshed in Hong Kong would shatter the prospects, however slim, of healing the rift with Taiwan, which Xi has declared, quote, can't be passed on for generations, close quote. Unless protesters overwhelm Hong Kong's government or its courts, Xi may well stick to a less dramatic strategy, the gradual absorption of Hong Kong's autonomy. Beijing's liaison office in Hong Kong has steadily extended its reach. It provides financing to pro-China businesses. It owns more than half the territory's bookstores, and it backs friendly candidates for government posts. As that influence grows, the underlying conflict will be the buried seed of future troubles. Ying Yi Hong, now of the Chinese University in Hong Kong, continues to measure people's attitudes and did so during the protests. Her latest conclusion: young Hong Kongers will have confidence in their local government if they see it as, quote, relatively autonomous, close quote, she said last week. Quote, however, if they think that the mainland government is interfering with the Hong Kong government, it plummets, close quote. For years, Hong Kongers have feared becoming, as a common saying goes, just another Chinese city. In Beijing, that description is regarded not as pejorative, but rather as the natural order of things. That by Evan Osnos on September 2nd, and certainly we could say that this NBA media situation is an escalation, and there have been more physical conflicts since then in the month that's passed, and you can read more about that in the news. For now, this is a Middle Perch Live 9.9. And I'm going to wrap up doing all this stuff this week. My reaction to this is I'm very disappointed in our country once again. And Americans once again, in this case, millionaire basketball players and billionaire owners of basketball, disappointed once again that capitalism has collided with ethics and with our rights and with human rights, and capitalism wins. And disappointed that there aren't athletes taking political stands once again. Well, I could just keep this list going, so rather than depress everybody, I'll just wrap it up with that.